Okay. So good evening, friends. We are very happy to start the second webinar being organized by National Insurance Academy. Uh, this time the topic is the rising cyber risk exposures due to the COVID, the pandemic, and insurance solution. So I'm sure that you will enjoy listening to the experts. We have the speakers, our director, G. Srinivasan, and Mr. Murli Nambiar, who's a senior vice president in charge of cybersecurity of Reserve Bank Information Technology Private Limited. And we have Mr. Najim Bilgrani, who is looking after the national the liability financial liability lines of Tata AIG, including the cyber insurance. So I'm sure that you will really be enjoying listening to them and will benefit out of the experts deliberation. And if you would like to post your questions, you are free to do it. We will take it up at the end of the event, all the some of the questions, because we have reserved around 10 minutes for question and answer at the end of the webinar. So the structure is first our director will give the opening remark, and then Mr. Murli Nambiar will speak on the cyber risk in the light of the COVID-19 situation. And then Mr. Najim Bilgrani will speak on the cyber insurance as an insurance solution to combat the cyber risk. And then the question and answer at the end. So I welcome you all once again, and now I request my director, Mr. G. Srinivasan sir, to give a opening remark. So you are.
Good evening to every one of you. I also, on behalf of National Insurance Academy, welcome you all to this webinar on a very important subject, rising cyber risk exposures due to COVID-19 and possible insurance solutions. My welcome to the eminent speakers from Mr. Murli is from Reserve Bank of India and Mr. Najim from Tata AIG. We at NIA are very happy to bring this webinar on a subject which has assumed a lot of importance in the current scenario. A couple of months back, we would not have imagined a world where shaking hands would be an issue, where people are afraid of coming close to each other, where social distancing would become the norm. So in last 2 months, I think the world has changed completely. The virus has no cure or vaccine. Hence, all countries have gone for total or partial lockdown as the only way of dealing with the virus. This has led to a situation of, most of the people working from home in all sectors, and of course, insurance is no exception to this. Insurance marketing, which is a very personalized business, is today done online. Insurance services are now given on virtual platforms. There's complete dependence on technology and collaborative virtual platforms. The employees are accessing data on these platforms with a huge risk of cyber attacks. The cyber criminals are always a step ahead and have seen huge opportunities for them to, do their job of making attacks in this virtual world. In India, cyber attacks have increased in the last 2 months as more people are working from home, accessing data and doing other transactions. More digital payments are happening. Outsourced virtual platforms are used with their vulnerabilities. IT security is also impacted, as people the IT security people are also probably working in a virtual way. Uh, there are a few news items which I thought I'll bring to your notice. WHO, which is of course the lead agency fighting the virus, has reported five-fold increase in cyber attacks during the COVID-19 period. The US agency Checkpoint US has reported almost 192,000 coronavirus-related cyber attacks per week, which is almost 30% increase compared to the previous weeks. The past 3 weeks, almost 20,000 new coronavirus related domains were registered. 17 of these are malicious or suspicious. Since January 2020, a total of 6,576 Zoom related domains have been registered globally. Nearly 13% are found to be suspicious. The global organizations, Interpol and Europol, have warned huge spikes in COVID-19 frauds. In mid-April, Google reported that just 1 week, more than 18 million daily malware and phishing emails relating to COVID-19 were sent via Gmail. Efforts to become contactless means more digital payments, and I think people are using digital payments more and more. And recent survey indicates that half of the customers are worried what will happen. Are they really safe? Verizon's latest data breach investigations showed that 32% of corporate data breaches started with a phishing mail. Recent, the Deloitte research report talks of, with many employees working from home, virtual private networks have become a lifeline, and there is a serious possibility of these networks being breached by cyber criminals. And then in remote places where there are no connectivity or power problems, employees work from public spaces, and this may expose the computing facilities and confidential information to theft or damage. The IT security, as I mentioned, is also likely to be impaired because people are working from home and they're also not able to move about. There are issues. The business continuity planning, which is put in place in many of the companies, especially insurance companies, I don't think would have ever imagined a world like COVID. So they also face problems. So these are some of the issues I thought I'll just draw the attention of all the attendees at this point of time. And I think we as somebody in the financial services and the insurance, I think cannot ignore this. I think we need to understand what are the exposures. We need to mitigate those exposures. And then of course, for others, there is always an insurance solution. So these are some of the things which will get discussed in this webinar, and I wish the webinar great success. Thank you.
Okay, friends, now I invite Mr. Murli Nambiar, who is a Senior Vice President from Reserve Bank Information Technology Private Limited, it's called REBIT, and he is in charge of the cybersecurity of Reserve Bank of India, and he holds over 26 years of IT experience in the area of the cyber risk and cybersecurity, and he is also a strategist, well-known strategist, innovator, and a visionary. So he has received many awards, particularly the CISO awards. When he was in charge of the IT, the system of various companies. He was the CISO for Mashreq Bank, ICICI Bank, Reliance Capital, the CTO for Reliance Life Insurance, Reliance International Business, and CTO for Apollo Munich Health Insurance. So he is one of the well-known speaker. I now request Mr. Murli Nambiar to give his thoughts on the rising cyber risk in the light of COVID-19 and what kind of preventive steps that one needs to take. Yes, sir, welcome to you.
Thank you. Good evening to all. I hope my audio and video is clear. I'll just share my presentation slides so that we can start with the presentations. Yeah, I hope the slide is clear. Is it visible, Professor Das?
Yeah. No.
Great. Great. So I'll just read out the slide numbers in between just to make sure we are all on the same page. So I'm on the slide number 1, which is the starting slide. And going to the next slide, I think Professor Doss has anyway spoken about me, so I'll skip this slide for the benefit of time. The agenda is primarily split up into these areas. One is I'm going to give a small brief about Rabbit. What is the workspace been since the COVID outbreak? What are the cyber risk and prevalence of these risks? Cyber attacks leveraging COVID outbreak, key attacks and modus operandi, and lastly, the security tips and the best practices that individuals and organizations should adopt to keep themselves safe from this particular cyber risk. I'm moving to slide number 4. Basically, just an overview about Rebit. It's a 100% wholly owned subsidiary of Reserve Bank of India, and it has been set up to look after the IT and the cyber security needs of RBI. We are 200 people now already in Rebit, and our focus is primarily on IT, cyber security, research and innovation, and systems audit for the regulated entities. We also advise, implement, and manage internal or system-wide IT projects for Reserve Bank of India. Moving to slide number 5, I'm going to talk about the cyber risk and the prevalence, the overview of critical cyber risk affecting organizations and individuals. Cyber attacks such as phishing, malware, ransomware, password attacks are very prevalent in the BFSI sector. Okay. The industry is a prime target for very obvious reasons that the money and personal information is what is normally found in the BFSI. So since time, we have seen these attacks only growing in terms of the quality and the quantity. People have become, or rather the hackers have become more and more innovative in terms of finding out new ways to circumvent the security of the organizations and also of individuals, who use this software and the applications. Moving on to slide number 7, I'm just going to touch on the COVID-19 and the insurance sector. So the sale of insurance policies through digital mode due to COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown has also become a great opportunity for fraudsters to lure customers and steal confidential and sensitive personal information. They are offering insurance policies at unbelievably low premiums through fake online offers. So in this regard, IRDA has also come out with a press release. They have warned the public not to fall prey to such online offers of insurance policies. And they have also given the list of entities who are registered with IRDA, the complete list of life insurers, general health insurers, so that people are aware about, where to go if they want to talk to somebody about insurance, which are the companies that they can go and talk to. This is actually listed on the IRDA website. So it helps people not to get misled by the, fake news and fake information passed on by the hackers. Going on to slide number 8, what we see here is a very typical cyber attack. So I'll just spend a few minutes here to just give an idea about what normally happens when we talk about cyber security, right? Usually the most favorite way, of a hacker to get into a company or to an individual is by carrying out an attack called as phishing, right? It's like phishing for information or phishing for any data, for example. So the attacker, what he does is he sends a phishing mail to an individual, which could be either an individual or a person within an organization. The user receives the link, the email with the link, and clicks on that link. At this moment, either the malware could be there on the email itself which will unpack and get executed, which is step number 3 as you see in the slide there. Or the malware may actually go and talk to a command and control center, which is step number 4, where some data is downloaded to the machine, after which the machine gets, the files of the machine gets encrypted and the user gets a ransomware screen. That is step number 5, right? And then once the file is encrypted, the user will get a communication saying how the ransom has to be paid. And that is step number 6, where you see about bitcoins that are usually the favorite mode of money transfer the hackers usually prefer. So this is at a very broad level how a typical cyber attack works. And just to give you a flavor about the kind of I would say complexity, the kind of activities that need to happen before a attack normally takes place, right? So we will understand a little bit more about these attacks and how to protect ourselves from these attacks. I'll go on to the next slide, number 9. Some of the cyber attacks that we have seen in BFSI in the last year, it's just a sample set to give you an idea. So for example, you have European banks who lost millions from physical cyber attacks. You have the FEMA who suffered a data leak. We have Kolhapur Urban Cooperative Bank, which was hit by a hacking incident. Airbus suffered a supply chain attack. You have militaries attacking computers. So as you can see, every month is a very active month. You have something or the other happening over there. And like I said earlier, that the attack pattern, the way in which a hacker normally goes and attacks an organization has changed drastically. It used to be simple viruses at one point in time, but now they have gone to levels of doing business email compromises. They have gone to the level of doing phishing, email malware drops. So it has become more and more sophisticated as time passes. And as and when the cybersecurity team of companies build up their defenses, the hackers will build a different mechanism and a modus operandi to try and break through into the organization. Moving on to slide number 10, this is an example of cyber risk, which I'm just sort of giving an idea here. So on the left-hand side column, you can see the channels or avenues that are usually used by organizations. So you have websites, you have emails, telecom, third parties, physical premises. The second column talks about the cyber risk that is applicable for these particular channels. So you can have a website defacement, you can have confidential data breach, identity theft, unauthorized access to sensitive data. The third column talks about the cyber threats, right? So you have phishing, which we will cover a little bit more in detail going forward. Phishing and smishing, basically through voice frauds and SMS frauds. Island hopping is a very new technique that has been taken up by the hackers. So here basically it talks about the attacking not the primary organization, but attacking the vendors who actually support those organizations, right? Many of these vendors may be small time vendors. They may not have too much of investments in security, but they will offer a very easy channel to get into the primary organization which the hacker is targeting. That is the term island hopping, as you can see here. And of course, social engineering, which is the most common used method. The last column talks about the motive. I mean, basically, some people do it for fun, profit, and some people do it for corporate espionage as well. Moving to slide number 11. Here, on the same channels that we talked about, we're talking about what are the opportunities for the attackers. So, in the website, basically, people create web applications that don't have proper security. They use weak and outdated technology, right? On emails, they don't have effective anti-malware, or the users are not aware. So they go and click on emails and attachments which they should not do. The telecom, again, lack of user awareness, gaps in security controls, and lack of awareness in admin and physical security. So this is basically the catalyst and the causes for cyber attacks. So moving on to slide number 12, the cyber attacks leveraging COVID outbreaks. So what are those attacks, right? The workspace has, slide number 14, the workspace has changed, drastically because of this COVID-19 impact, right? So there are a lot of changes and associated challenges that come along with those change. There is disruption, confusion, and paranoia. Technology challenges have come up. There are gaps and glitches, so machines don't work as expected when you're doing a work from home. This is basically an acid test for business continuity plan. So if organizations had a BCP plan in place, this is actually the test where it would, it's a test by fire to actually see whether those plans are just put on paper or it's really working on the ground. Like I said, teleworking and web conferences have become the de facto norm. Collaboration has become a huge challenge. I mean, how do you talk to people who are sitting at home? There are some people who are working. So how do you collaborate and still ensure the same quality in terms of work? Reduced personalization in the work life and security control failures. So your machines don't have the adequate security. Some people give access to personal machines, which can also cause, which can open up a challenge for that malware to get into the company's environment. So these changes have brought about these challenges also, and we will see how to sort of tackle these challenges in the next few slides. Moving to slide number 15, some of the COVID-themed cyber attacks are primarily using phishing, and they use the subject of coronavirus or COVID-19 as a lure. So there is a heavy interest from a lot of people in terms of finding out more and more about the virus, finding out what's happening, how the malware is spreading across countries. So this interest leads to a particular desire to know more, which the hackers exploit. So they exploit this by the most common mechanism of phishing, that which I'll cover a little bit more in detail. But it's the most common and the most fast method for a hacker to get into an organization, right? Malware distribution, again, which are coronavirus or COVID-19 themed lures. Registration of new domain names related to coronavirus, right? So people's interest again is when they see new domains, new sites, they want to go and check what the sites offer in terms of information, and hence they are used for attacks. Some examples of phishing email subject lines include 2020 coronavirus updates, 2019 nCoV new confirmed cases in your city. Now, this kind of subject lines will actually interest a person more in terms of clicking on that email and in turn clicking on the attachment which may have a malware in it, right? So users working from home are more vulnerable to increased scams, reaching through multiple channels and devices, including personal ones. So while a company assigned machine, a laptop, may be very sort of well secured and will have a lot of security in place, the personal ones are the ones where the worry anomaly is, right? So if it is not as secured, the possibility of some malware getting into that machine and then in turn getting into your corporate environment is pretty high. The next few slides, I'm just going to give you an indication about the rise in threats, in terms of what is the exponential rise that we are seeing after COVID hit us. So if you see this slide, the rise from January to February to March is phenomenal. It's just increasing exponentially from a threat perspective. Slide number 17 shows the number of domains that are created per day. Okay, these domains, as you can see, have increased from 23rd of February, and they have just gone up. So the domain creation primarily is the first step that a malicious user or a hacker does to create his own fake website or his fake application, which is then used to target the users. So this is an indication to tell you how fast this environment is, the threat is growing. This is the daily registration of Zoom domains. Okay, I'll talk about Zoom a little bit more in detail. Zoom is basically a video conferencing software. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But this shows the rise in terms of how Zoom domains are basically being increased. The rise in threats of malware and phishing sites. Okay, as you can see, they're just shooting up from March onwards, and these sites and these are being visited by users across the globe, and that is leading to more and more attacks on organizations. This is another slide which talks about the monthly spam and the monthly malware detections. So you can see the rise, right? You're seeing monthly spam in January was 4,786, and in March it has shot up to 8,97,711. Similarly for the malware detection, right? So there is an exceptional increase in incidents also, which is primarily because of the earlier slides that I showed you. Slide 21 talks about the increase in incidents also. Director Mr. Srinivasan spoke about this. The number of malicious URLs that are related to COVID-19 is 48,000, right? There is an increase in spam of 220 times. 737 malwares which are detected primarily for COVID-19, right? So there has been a great increase in terms of the incidents also, and all primarily due to the earlier slides I showed you, where the number of domains were registered, where the number of sites are being registered. So all of this are talking about that effect of those activities that have happened. Slide number 22. Cyber attacks have risen 5-fold as per WHO, World Health Organization, and fraud claims have jumped by 400%. Right? There are 70,000 new coronavirus related web domains registered. 2% were found to be malicious and 21% were found to be suspicious. Right? Google blocks 240 million COVID related daily spam mails each day. This is every day, right? 240 million. And UPI scams are on the rise in India as well, which are taking advantage of COVID related charitable drives. So these total attacks and incidents that is notified to public is like a tip of the iceberg. We actually don't know the real extent of issues that would be hitting around the globe, right? So, but even this are so alarming that it requires every one of us to be cautious and take the necessary mechanisms and precautions to ensure that we are not personally or our organizations are not impacted because of us. Slide number 23 talks about what are cyber criminals actually taking advantage of, right? So, like I said earlier, it's the scare, the curiosity, and the need for a cure, right? We are human beings, so we have this tendency to, and the media also does a great job of raising the bar in terms of, giving information that sort of doesn't relax a person, but makes him more and more anxious, right? So all of this anxious drives the person to find out more information, right? So this is one, human aspect that gets targeted by these attackers. The generosity of public towards charitable acts is another area that sort of gets targeted. Phishing attacks, like I mentioned, governments are passing a relief bill, so that also gets targeted. Subjects such as vaccine-related lures, COVID-19 tax refund lures, the WHO scams and fraudulent charity pages, ransomware attacks, work from home. Now, this is one area where people are not used to working from home, right? So, but you have a now there's no way out but to work from home, and then there is always the disturbances that happen when you're working from home. So people tend to be less vigilant, they are more relaxed, and these kind of environment is what the hackers normally love to exploit. The last point is security lapses in hosting video conferences. We will cover this a little bit more in detail in the next few slides. Some cases and their modus operandi. Slide number 25. COVID-19 targeting by APTs, Gamma-Redan APT group, right? So I'll just give you a small explanation here. This is very important. APT stands for Advanced Persistent Threats. Okay, these are basically threat actors who obtain intelligence on national and international healthcare policy. Their job is not to make a quick win, but by the name of Advanced Persistent Threat, what they mean is they actually come into an environment and they are there for some time to see what's happening. They analyze what's happening and then they start their attack. So it takes time for the attacks to initiate. It usually takes about 3 months, 6 months before the attacker decides that it is the right time. He has got all the relevant information and then he starts the attack, right? So the typical way in which a APT normally works is like this. So you have an email attachment which has got a document file. The document file, when you invoke, when you execute, it goes to the web, to a server, where it picks up another file which has got the malware. That malware gets downloaded to the machine, and the machine then executes this, right? So APTs are actually a bigger threat than any of the normal threats that we normally see, right? This is another APT 36, which is believed to be operating from Pakistan, and they target organizations in India. Their primary job is to target Indian organizations. So they also sort of use these phishing attacks to send emails which look very authentic. And once you click on it, then it goes to these APT actors who work on those data that you have given to them, and then they start exploiting the environment. So the APTs are usually a very advanced level of threat vectors, and the most difficult to find, but they are a very active group in the cybersecurity space. I'm just going to touch on a few cases on specific areas. So case 1 talks about malicious mobile apps, slide number 27. Here, the mobile app basically is used to sort of download ransomware on machines, and when the ransomware gets into the machine, then the person has to pay ransom, which is usually in Bitcoin, to the ransom attacker, right? So this is how it normally works. So this is an example of a COVID tracker application. When you install this application, the app, though it looks genuine, is actually a malware app. So once you give download this app into your mobile, the app will take the permissions which will allow it to take data from your mobile and send it to the attacker, right? Similarly, you will see a COVID fake infection heat map. Again, it is loaded with malware that will steal credentials, payment card numbers, cookies, and other sensitive information. Slide number 31 talks about phishing. So phishing, like I said earlier, it is basically an email that is coming to you from, which looks like very genuine email. It looks like it has come from a WHO or a UN or a government body, and it will give you some information and ask you to click on some links or some attachment in the email, right? So when you click on those attachments or on the links, this is how the attachment will look like. So you have a typical phishing email. If you look at this email, you will find that how do you identify this, right? So the first one which you look at is a very generic kind of an email ID there. You will see the number 2, which is again doesn't have the name of the person. It just says Mr. Mrs. Then number 3, it talks about 700,000 euros. I mean, this is not the kind of money you normally send on emails, right? And number 4 is basically a person who's having a Gmail account, especially if it's a bank. Nobody will have a Gmail account, right? So these are some of the telltale signs of a phishing email, which people have to be very careful about. This is a fraudulent website which is launched. If you click on a link, then you go to this website where this particular app gets downloaded. And once you download the app, the malware gets installed on your machine, which will take permissions from you to access your contacts, look at your SMS, and not only look at your SMS, but also to send SMSs on your behalf, right? Some examples of COVID phishing SMS messages, right? Again, if you see, all of these URLs are basically URLs that don't have any validity. So if you click on this URL, you will be again taken to a website which is a malware hosted website, and you will possibly download some malware into your mobile. Slide number 37 talks about the EMI scams. EMI scams basically, the moratorium that is offered by RBI to a lot of people in terms of delaying their loan payment is being exploited by these fraudsters. They call up these people and get their details, banking details, their customer details, and they carry out frauds on these people, right? This is one more scam that normally happens. Number 38 talks about the attacks on video conferencing platforms. So we have seen a lot of news about video conferencing software like Zoom and Microsoft Teams that are being exploited by these hackers. When you're doing a work from home, the only option available for you is to do a remote connectivity, right? You have to do a remote conferencing with your teammates, with companies, and these softwares have become very, very popular in the last few days. So the hackers also know that, and they have now started sending phishing emails that actually include the names of Zoom and Microsoft Teams as the attachments, which when you click gets downloads some malware into the machines. Some examples of how the Zoom meeting installer looks like. So you can see here. Example of how the Indonesian's information and communication technology board's virtual meeting was hijacked by a participant, and he put a pawn in the entire meeting session. So you can see the kind of impact that this kind of loose security on video conferencing can lead to. Many of these Zoom credentials are available for sale on the dark web, right? There are attacks on other video conferencing software also, like Microsoft Teams and Skype. It is not to say one is better than the other, but every one of them has got their own security issues and vulnerabilities, which the security team of organizations need to plug, before they allow access to the users in the company. This is an example of the IDs that were found on the dark web, right? These are the IDs of Zoom users. And lastly, the UPI frauds, slide number 44. We're talking about the UPI fraud scams, which are targeting COVID themes and charitable drives. So, fake accounts, they trick the customers looking to donate for charities to send the money via UPI to the fraudster's account instead of the genuine account, right? So UPI is also being targeted. As you can see, this one example of a COVID UPI fraud. Instead of the PM Cares at SBI, you can see the PM Care Fund at SBI, PM.care at SBI. You have different such names where people don't realize, and they sort of put the funding over here. So these are some of the areas that people have to be careful about. Some another COVID scam examples, right? So why do cyber attacks target the end users, and why do they succeed? Basically, people trust all emails that come to them, right? And they don't think twice before responding and checking the sender, who has sent it, whether it is a genuine sender, whether it is an email that I was expecting, for example. So these kind of checks and balances which a user should do is usually not done. And in the haste, they click on suspicious link in the messages, they download and open unsafe files, they keep very weak and guessable passwords, and they install mobile apps from unauthorized sources. So all of these are the reasons why actually a hacker is managing to get into the environment, either it's an end user or an organization. So how do we protect ourselves, right? I'm on slide number 49. How do we protect ourselves, and what are the best practices? Preventive tips, right? So don't click that link. That link which you get on your mails, on your SMSs, they're typically links that are fraudulent. So you should not directly click on these links. Okay, if you actually have it on your email, and if you hover your mouse over the link, you will be able to see the actual link and not what is seen on the screen, right? It will show you the actual link where it is going, and then you can decide whether it is a genuine one or whether it is a fraudulent one. So do not click on the emails which are mentioned in unsolicited emails. Slide number 51. Be cautious of the message theme and context. Online deals and offers where items are bought or sold at unbelievably cheap prices, right? They're trying to tempt you. And be skeptical of every piece of information that you receive on COVID-19. You should ideally go to only authenticated websites of the government to validate any news that you receive on COVID-19. So check the source. If it is not reliable, then visit the government's authentic portals for details. Before making payments or sharing bank details online, verify the opposite party, right? This is extremely important because there is an attack called as business email compromise, where the email ID of a corresponding entity is hacked, and the corresponding entity doesn't know about it, is unaware about it, and the hacker sends an email from that email ID. That's when the entire the person goes and makes the payment and realizes later on that it was a hack that happened for him. Step back, think before acting. Always consider why somebody wants your information and if it is appropriate. There is no reason why you have to share your username and password to access public information. Any public information where they ask for username and password, you can be sure it is, or almost sure that it is some attempt to try and take those credentials off you. Never share OTPs. Do not share passwords or OTPs that you receive. You should always be careful about responding to password reset emails which are unsolicited. So if you have not asked for it and you get a mail which asks you to reset your password, please be extremely careful. Slide number 55, avoiding coronavirus scams. So these are almost similar to what I've covered earlier. So don't respond to text, emails, or calls about checks from government. Instead, check the official website. Ignore online offers for vaccinations. Be wary of ads for test kits. Hang up on robocalls used by scammers to pitch everything from low price health insurance to work at home schemes. And do your homework when it comes to donation. Never donate in cash or gift card. Always use online payment channels. Slide number 56. Insurance coverage is an excellent idea. So insurance coverage for privacy breaches, security incidents, technology outages is already available. Rapid rise of remote connectivity will create new vectors for cyber claims. Claims could be due to cyber attacks, technology errors, and omissions. And carefully review cybersecurity policy and implemented controls. From an insurance perspective, if you are providing an insurance cover to an organization, it is very important that you carry out this due diligence, whether the company has got a very robust security policy and how effective is the implementation of their controls. Slide number 57, adapt cybersecurity to support new business needs, right? So everything has changed. Now it's remote working. So people use technologies that are called VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure, bring your own devices, etc. So cybersecurity has to move in line with this new working model. It cannot be complacent. It cannot do the same thing that it was doing earlier. Now the cybersecurity has to be in line with what these new challenges offer. Carry out a business continuity check to benchmark and address gaps. Plan insurance for cyber and physical security controls. Review and test information security continuity plans. Consider updating the policies and procedures for the changed workspace. You have to address important issues such as staggered work resumption strategies and health checks at workplaces, screening, and other physical security measures. Focus on strengthening existing cybersecurity controls. These are more technology focused, but it's very important that your cybersecurity team also sort of gears up to identify the attacks before they hit your company or before they hit your users, right? One of the most important part in this entire slide that I will recommend is a end user security awareness campaign. This is extremely important. I mean, if you have this particular campaign right, then all of the threats that I told you about can be mitigated to a large extent, right? So this is what the last slide from my side. So some takeaways from the Rebit website. You can browse www.rebit.org.in. There are some takeaways there which you could look at, and depending on your needs, you can use those. We also have a Cyber Pulse newsletter, which captures a lot of these events and attacks that we normally see. You can subscribe to that as well. So stop, think, and connect. So with this, I'll end my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much, Mr. Murli Nambiar, for your elaborative discussion on the topic of cyber risk. So now I request Mr. Najim Bilgrani from Tata AIG to give his perspective on the cyber insurance, how cyber insurance will act as a risk mitigation tool for the cyber risk. And just to brief the introduction of Mr. Najim. Mr. Najim has been with the Tata AIG for more than 15 years, and he has been looking into the area of liability lines, particularly the financial lines of liability, and as well as the cyber insurance. He is a national head looking into the various types of financial line insurances and cyber insurances. So Mr. Najim has been the regular the speaker in many conferences and then faculty in many institutions. Mr. Najim, I request you to give your thought on this topic of how insurance can help mitigating the cyber risk.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. And thank you, Mr. Murli, for the detailed description of cyber world at this point of time. Now, when it comes to cyber insurance, uh, being an underwriter, this is extremely high exposure and extremely risky product to underwrite. And why I'm saying so, because when it comes to the cyber world, of course, COVID has made this exposure much bigger, much complex. But even without COVID, this is a extremely big exposure, and even Lloyd's of London and many other insurers, reinsurers globally have identified cyber is one of the three major exposure for an organization. So probably a pandemic or a AOG perils and similarly cyber is one of the major exposure for an organization. Now, as I said, even before COVID, if you see this exposure, and particularly with respect to India, when we talk about India, the common thing which I listen when I go for these presentations with respect to cyber policy, many people talking about that we don't have seen claim, we don't have that much exposure, which probably a European country or a US organization may have. But believe me, we are as exposed or probably more exposed than those countries. And if you ask me my own view on this, why? Because we are less aware, or probably we don't take care. We have that attitude of chalta hai, and that's why this has become a big exposure for us. There are several reports which suggest that India, after US and China, is the most favorite destination for hackers. In fact, when it comes to the social networking sites, after US, we see most number of attacks. Talking about Indian organization, there are several news which is like coming on a daily basis, starting from many major multinational companies, many what you call government organization, many utility companies are getting hacked on a like daily basis. In fact, when I'm talking about COVID, and in fact, I would like to relate this. I was reading a report issued by IBM, and as per the report, they say that the average time to identify a breach was 7 months in 2019. And in fact, the other section of the report talks about that average life cycle of a breach, which lasted almost 11 months. I'm talking about from the breach date to the containment date. Now, imagine this is prior to COVID. This COVID, when employees are working from home, this has become much bigger for us as an insurer, and of course for the organization as well. Insurers globally are extremely worried, and they expect the cyber claims to go up in multiple folds. In fact, they're expecting these claims to start coming in next 6 months to one year period time. If you ask me now, what has changed from the claims point of view, we have it's actually too early to comment that yes, we have started receiving COVID related claims, or this particular incident probably may be because of COVID. No, at least in India, we as an insurer, we haven't seen COVID related claim, and as I said, it's too early to comment on that. But yes, when it comes to this exposure, it's extremely big. And in fact, see how this is revolving. One side, the spent on the cyber security is going up on a like monthly basis. There are organizations, and in fact, every organization is now identifying this as an exposure, and they are spending money when it comes to cyber security. And in fact, the expected figure, as per the Gartner report, for 2022, the figure, the spend on the cyber security supposed to reach 133 billion, and in fact by 2025 it's supposed to reach 400 billion US dollar. So that's a kind of investment the companies are making. But on the other side, there is a report which is released by University of Maryland, and which says that hackers attack on every 39 seconds, and on an average 2,244 times a day. So in fact, one of the major Indian daily has almost 6 months back published the news wherein like they claimed that on every 10th minute somebody or the other gets hacked in India.
Yeah,
So
Mr.
that's
Ajay, your slide actually we are not able to see. It's still on the first slide, so you can move the slide. Yeah, continue. Yeah,
Can
continue.
you
Yeah,
can you
now
see the
yeah,
slide now?
now it's okay. Yeah, yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you, sir. So this is what we are talking about when we are talking about this exposure. In fact, if you particularly ask me after the COVID, what has changed, and in fact, we as an underwriter, we need to keep eye on these things. And I was reading one research by Barricade, and they suggest that 51% companies have already seen the increase of email phishing attacks while working from home. So definitely there is an increase, that the trend is changing. In fact, on the other side, very scary picture when the report also suggests that 50% companies have allowed their employees to work from their personal email IDs. And not only that, they have also allowed the employees to work from the personal devices. Why this happened? Reason why? Because if you read the reports and the data available, when it comes to business continuity plan, companies were not worried. And in fact, globally, it says that only 29% of the companies were having tested business continuity plan. So otherwise, all were on paper. And that's why when this happened, COVID-19 happened, and they're supposed to move their operations from work from home scenario, practically they don't have provisions for that. And that's why if the company needs to run their business, they have to allow the employees to work from home. And subsequently, they have to ask them to use their personal IDs, ask them to use their personal devices, which is increasing the exposure in many times. In fact, we all understand this is extreme situation wherein each and every company, each and every industry is going through a liquidity and profitability related issues. And that's why the solution which they have adopted at this point of time is cost cutting. And unfortunate part is like this cost cutting is also affecting the cybersecurity spend. And in fact, 40% of the company have already confirmed that they are also cut down their cybersecurity budget as well. So this is how what you call this exposure. So if you ask me from an underwriting point of view, these are the exposures which are changing dramatically, and this can bring a huge exposure to the insurance on the insurance company. Now coming to the offering, what is offered in the market right now. When it comes to cyber policy, I personally feel that it should be always a solution rather than just an indemnity. You can't just give a sum insured, you can't just offer a sum insured to an insured wherein like if there is a claim and you will pay the claim. That's not the way I think cyber insurance should be handled. My personal view, that it should be a complete solution, and that's why like many companies including Tata AIG, we have a whole lot of tie-ups in place, wherein if suppose there is any emergency wherein client needs a forensics, probably they need a legal consultation, or probably there is a crisis to be managed and you need a crisis consultant, these tie-ups should be in place so that the insured can have, and probably you may ask that that's not a job of an insurance company, why you want to do that? See, please understand, this will not only help the insured, it will also help the insurer to minimize the exposure of what you call the claim. It is because these claims are time sensitive, and if you ask these private limited or a small or SME companies, they practically don't even know that if there is a WannaCry kind of incident, whom to approach at that point of time. And that's why these tie-ups are extremely important, not only for the insured but also for the insurers. Now coming to the third point which we offer as an end-to-end solution and we should offer is the prevention. So of course, like when something goes wrong, you should have a team to support the insured, but at the same time you also need to have a team which will advise the insured to improve their cybersecurity, probably to improve their employees' awareness with respect to what you call cyber. And that's why like the offering when it comes to cyber, it should be an end-to-end solution. That's my view when it comes to the cyber offering. Now let's move to the cyber laws spectrum, wherein we will be discussing what is covered and what is not covered by using these four graphs, wherein we will be talking the policy, and the policy basically is divided into four sections. In fact, the first section of the policy talks about the first party cover under the policy, and the second section also talk about the third party financial financial liability which may arise on the insured because of a data breach. It could be loss of personal data, it could be loss of corporate data. So that's what the policy covers. So policy do cover the first party expenses as well as the third party legal liability on them. Now when it comes to the exclusions, basically if you see, the exclusions are related to first party as well as the exclusions are related to third party as well. Now when I talk about the first party exclusion, probably the what you call exposures like your bodily injury, property damage, same for the insured as well as for the third party are applicable, and we will definitely discuss the exclusions in detail in my further slides.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You can see the
slide. Yeah, please synchronize your talking with the slide. Sometimes slide
Sure.
is.
So here what we are talking about, we're talking about the trigger events that what are the trigger events and what all incident an insured should report to the insurer when it comes to the cyber policy. So starting with the data security breach. So as soon as there is any unauthorized access which can be actual or alleged insured experience, they should be informing their insurer that there is a unauthorized access by a third party to their computer system, and then subsequently looks like a breach, and they will be informing this to the insurer. The other thing which can be triggered, which can be treated as a triggering event under the policy is your breach of data protection laws. So if like you could be in any jurisdiction, you may be in Europe, and GDPR is the applicable law there, or probably in India, and probably very soon we will have a Personal Data Protection Act getting implemented. So if whichever jurisdiction you're working with in, and then subsequently if there is any actual or alleged situation wherein you have been alleged for a data protection breach, then in such situation also you should be informing the insurer. There are a whole lot of covers available under the policy which will provide protection to you. Similarly, newsworthy event wherein any actual or alleged public communication with respect to the breach of data protection law or breach of data security. In both the situations, if there is any ill publicity which is hampering the reputation of the organization, or there should be a good there is a goodwill loss to the organization, in both these situations it is will be treated as a newsworthy event, and there are covers available under the policy. Insured should be notifying the insurer. The other two things are like very clear, as that by name suggests, that if there is any extortion threat, and then subsequently if there is any business interruption, probably due to the system failure or the security failure at the insured end, and they will be what you call experiencing those, they should be informing their insurer about that. Let's move to the first party data liability cover under the policy. So when I say a first party cover under the policy, there are a whole lot of covers available under the policy, and starting with, of course, forensics, which is the first trigger in every cyber claim. And in fact, when I'm talking about forensics, let me tell you how what you call frequently these trends in cyber insurance are changing. So of course, Tata AIG was the first in India to launch this policy in 2014, but AIG is writing, and AIG was the first insurer in 1997. They have launched this product, and up till 2008, their experience that up to like if we take 100 rupees as a payout in the particular in those what you call cyber claims which they have paid out, as per them 85% of the amount which they paid under forensics. And then later we have saw a change, and then what we saw a lot of extortion demand, and then subsequently there are payouts with respect to those extortion demand. And if you ask me about the last year experience, most of the insurers globally under the cyber policy, what they paid the business interruption claim, wherein like few of the big names across the globe, whether it's a logistic company or manufacturing company or steel giants, have got hit by those ransomware. Their business got interrupted, and subsequently huge losses which they have claimed under the cyber policy in the network interruption section. Now, when I'm talking about forensics, what basically covers here, the policy covers the professional fee with respect to identification of that particular breach, whether that breach which system maybe probably has got compromised, whether the hackers are still there in the system, or what data probably have been taken away from their system, or how to mitigate that particular those particular events in future. So all these consultation which these forensics guys are giving, the policy pays for that. Although it's a part of an exclusion, but I would like to specify here that any what you call expenses which the insured incur with respect to the updation of their systems, upgradation of their systems, that's definitely not covered under the policy. The other thing which gets picked up under the policy is the credit monitoring. Now, what happened basically when these hacks happened and there is a data breach, the insured and probably even the third party would like to see how that data is getting used in the cyberspace. And you need the experts to sit and monitor that so that they can curtail the losses. Of course, the guys who are doing these credit monitoring services, they ask for they have their professional fee to be paid. Policy picks up them as well. Then we also cover the notification cost under the policy. So all these data protection laws have a mandatory notification condition which says that the insured should notify the individual customers, all the stakeholders, including the regulators, as soon as possible. In fact, if you talk about GDPR, the time limit is 72 hours. Within that, they have to notify all those customers about the breach, the kind of precautions which they take. And AIG suggests that the average notification cost comes around like $3 to $7 per notification. So just imagine if you have 1 lakh customers whose data has got compromised, imagine the kind of cost the company will incur. Similarly, policy also pays for a crisis management, wherein like your public relation with respect to company as well as the directors and officers get picked up. And in fact, we have seen when you talk about cyber claims in India, we have seen practically the claim wherein like there was a gaming company from where like the employees steal the data on 14th February 2018 to share it with his girlfriend, and then subsequently she passed on to few of her friend, and then there was a data breach, and subsequently the company has to hire a PR agency to respond to the public at large. So those expenses gets picked up under the policy. Policy do also cover the legal expenses. It could be with respect to a regulatory investigation. It could be with respect to a third party claim. It could be even with respect to any allegation with respect to the Personal Data Protection Act. In all such situations, there is a provision under the policy wherein the policy pays the legal cost on behalf of the insured. The policy also covers the network interruption. So as I said, if suppose there there is a breach and subsequently the computer systems of the company are not working and subsequently leading to a net profit loss to the company, policy pays those net profit loss which they incur due to these cyber breaches. And especially when it comes to these manufacturing company, and as I said, like there are ample of cases available on the public domain wherein you will find, in fact, last year itself There were many manufacturing companies globally have suffered these kind of attacks, through which like their business were majorly affected, and they suffered a huge business interruption loss, which got picked up in their cyber policy. Policy also covers the restoration cost of the data. So if suppose the first party data which got deleted, destroyed or corrupted in these breaches, and the insured wants to recreate that data, the cost of the recreation along with the cost of the professional fee to identify whether the data can be restored or not also gets picked up under the policy. Apart from that, in fact, a policy do also pay for the extortion losses. And let me tell you, India, so we started talking about cyber extortion after WannaCry, but India is one of the favorite destination for hackers for long when it comes to cyber extortion. In fact, there were case studies available on public domain wherein the Hyderabad trader system got completely compromised, and the hackers sitting in Middle East, they were able to move the cursor of that particular gentleman, and they found some confidential detail, asked for a 10 million settlement, and the negotiated settlement was almost 5 million US dollar. So that's the kind of exposure which policy do cover, and there are provisions in the policy wherein these losses of the which is in kind of first party are covered in the policy. We'll moving to the next slide. That's the third party cover under the policy. So when I say third party, it is basically the legal liability on the insured which gets picked up under the policy. And in fact, many times I see people asking me this question, that we see hardly any claim when it comes to third party data liability. But when you read the policy, it looks like the policy is focused on the third party data liability side. Probably I will agree with you on this, and reason why this product has got developed in US market, and there the legal liability is a major thing. And when the underwriters developed this product, at that point of time, the focus was on the what you call third party data liability side. But slowly what we see a trend wherein like you see more and more first party expenses getting covered under the policy, either by endorsement or by changing the policy wordings. Insurer are slowly picking up the first party expenses, and the spend, in fact, including Tata AG, the claims, the kind of claims which we have paid last year, most of the claims which we have paid, except one or two, were on the what you call on the first party expenses side. So when I'm saying third party legal liability, of course, if there's any breach of personal information or any breach of corporate information, and then subsequently insureds receive a claim from the third party, the policy pays for the defense cost as well as settlement. And in fact, if there's any regulatory investigation which probably lead to an administrative fine, that also can be covered under the policy. The policy also pays for the monitoring cost. So if suppose there is a third party data breach and the regulator or the third party asks for the monitoring to be done for those data, the policy pays for those monitoring fee as well. The other major thing which gets picked up under the policy is the IPR. So if there's any third party IPR which has been compromised from your system and there is a liability arising on you, policy do cover that as well. So that is on the, yes sir.
Just in 2 minutes, can you close it?
Sure sir.
Yeah. Continue. Just 2 minutes. Can you wind up?
Okay, sure, sir. Now, when it comes to the what you call exclusion under the policy, if you see the major exclusion under the policy is limited to the bodily injury and property damage. So the thing which you should remember is the policy is meant to cover the non-physical losses. So any physical losses, probably it could be your physical loss to the what you call factory, physical loss to the property, that's definitely not covered under this policy. Similarly, if there's any first party or third party bodily injury, that is not covered under the policy. Apart from that, the other thing which is very important to understand, which is not covered under the policy, is your first party data. So any first party data for that matter is not covered under the policy. Similarly, war is an exclusion under the policy, but at the same time, if it is a cyber terrorism, policy has a provision to cover that as well. So these are the major exclusion under the policy. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer those questions.
Yeah. We have questions raised by the participants. Okay, the questions to Mr. Murli. Okay, the question is, under this lockdown, the people are, adapting to work from home, and some of the people who are working, with a sensitive customer data. They say that what happens if the sensitive customer data gets breached? And what kind of precautions, preventive steps one should take to protect the customer data?
Sorry. Yeah. So that's a good point. So I'm assuming that the machine on which the person is working on those sensitive information is a corporate machine.
Yeah.
Okay. So if it's a corporate machine, usually corporates have 2 or 3 major solutions that they deploy to protect those information. Okay. One is you have something called as a DLP, a data loss prevention solution. Okay. So I don't know if this is there in the company, but I'll just give you the general trend, right? So DLP helps to sort of ensure that if any data is pilfered from the machine, then that information is known to the corporation. So the organization comes to know when any data is being taken out from the machine. Okay. While the data is residing on the machine, there is another technology called DRM, stands for Document Rights Management, right? So you can actually encrypt the data on your laptop such that if the data also gets compromised by anybody, it is practically of no use to them, because they will not have the keys of that particular encryption setup, which will allow them to open and use that data. So there's a technology called DRM, Document Rights Management. It's also called IRM, Information Rights Management, which is a very effective tool to protect the data on laptop. So you should keep it secure. You should keep it encrypted if the customer information is there.
Okay. Mr. Murli, a similar question. They are asking is when they are using their own personal computer or laptop, and how do we protect the personal data, some of the personal information? So what happens is when their system gets hacked, not only the corporate information may get breached, but also some of the customers, financial information or personal information also may get breached. So how do we protect this personal data?
This is on the personal machine, right?
Yeah, personal machine.
Right. So one of the things that they should keep in mind is that they should have a very strong login ID and password on the machine. Okay. Do not keep passwords like ABC1234 or ABC@1234. These are actually calls for getting hacked. So ensure that you have an extremely strong password on your machine that will be very difficult to break. Many hackers, once they get into the machine, the first thing that they try to do is get the local, admin password so that they can put their software, install the malware and take information out. So you have to keep a very strong password for the local administrator on your personal machine and for your own ID as well. Point number 1. Point number 2, please invest in good antivirus and anti-malware softwares. Okay, it is not to say that these softwares are able to catch everything under the world, but these softwares give you a very good level of protection so that if somebody does manage to get into your machine, the softwares will trigger an alert and give you the information that something is happening on the machine. Right? That is number 2. Number 3 is a little bit more technical. If you know how to configure your firewall on your local machine, it adds an additional level of security. So in the firewall on the local machine, you can actually decide and prevent who can come into the machine. You can actually prevent any third parties from connecting to the machine itself. Right? This requires a little bit of technical knowledge, but it is not something that you can't find out, or your IT team will not help you to do it. So very easy to find out. But if you put that or enable that local firewall on your machine, then you have an additional level of security so that nobody can break into it and do what they want to do, kind of thing. So broadly, I would say these 3 points is something that everybody should look at, and that will help them to keep their machines, personal machines, also secure.
Okay. There has been a question relating to the Trojan botnets, which has been on the news recently, impacting the financial sector. So the question is whether RBI has issued any kind of guidelines to the financial institutions in light of this.
So let me be very distinct. I speak on behalf of Rebit. I don't speak on behalf of RBI. This is a Rebit view. See, I don't think RBI has specifically released any directions on Trojans. Okay, RBI has released guidelines which talk about the general cyber security that organizations should adopt, right? In which these kind of threats are also addressed by default, right? So when you say Trojans, they are just one type of malware, right? And the Trojans also are sort of disseminated in the same manner, in the same channel that I spoke about earlier, which is a phishing channel, right? So when a phishing mail comes to you, when you click on it, it depends on what malware the hacker is trying to put on your machine. It could be a virus, it could be a Trojan, it could be a keyboard logger, it could be anything that he's trying to do, right? So Trojan is just one example of a malware which is propagated by the usual modus operandi of phishing emails. Okay, so coming back to the question, RBI has not given a very specific direction on Trojans, but they have a direction that says that you have to have these kind of security measures into place. It's called the cyber security guidelines from RBI, and it says this is what you should be putting into place in your organizations, kind of thing.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Murli, for your deliberations.
Sure, thank you.
That was interesting. Okay, now we move over to Mr. Najim. There are a couple of questions to you.
Sure.
Yeah, one is the question is they would like to know whether the cyber policy covers loss of money also.
Yeah, so cyber policy is not meant to cover the financial loss, whether it's a first-party financial loss or a third-party financial loss. We see policies offering some sub-limits with respect to social engineering, fraud, and things like that. But if you see the policy construct, the policy is not meant to cover the first-party financial loss or the third-party financial loss. Probably, yes, when it comes to third-party financial loss, if it is due to a data breach and due to which a third party suffered subsequently a financial loss, policy do cover that. But a direct financial loss is not, cyber is not the policy. Probably crime is the right policy to pick up those exposure.
Okay. The next question is now under this situation of work from home, whatever the data breach happens, whether the cyber policy picks up that.
This is a very good question, and it is getting discussed on various forums, and especially when it comes to BYOD, bring your own device, because if you refer the policy and the computer definition under the policy, it talks about the equipments owned by the company, and when you are using your own device, it's not falling under the definition of computer system, and that's a gray area, and policy will not pick up claims if the claims is arising because you're using your personal what you call laptops or mobiles, and due to which there is a what you call cyber breach.
Okay. The next question is, in view of this COVID scenario, do we need to inform anything to our cyber policy, particularly the insurer, in view of the increased security breach exposure due to the breach?
Again, a very great question, sir. See, the thing is like how we underwrite a policy on the basis of your proposal form. And when you were have given the proposal form, you have declared something, and on the basis of that, the insurers have written the policy. Now, if because of COVID, your processes, your technology have changed drastically, then probably it's a change of risk, and the insurer need to notify about this.
The last question. The question is that suppose cyber breach happens on a day one, and maybe after 6 months, it acts on the system, and the client comes to know, and after a month, he reports to the insurance company. So in such situations, so how do we really assess the claim? Which date you take? Is there any restriction in informing the insurance company that within so many days that the claim has to be notified?
So I will tell you, policy is evolving. When it comes to the cyber policy, it's a new product in India and it's evolving. As of now, the Indian policies have a prior act date. Although, if you ask me, globally, the trend is there is no prior act date. It is a discovery policy. So the day you discover the breach, the policy should respond to those claims. But when it comes to India, the insurers, the policy which the insurers are issuing, they're issuing with the prior act date. So if suppose the breach has happened prior to taking the policy, probably that will not get picked up under the policy.
Okay, so thank you, Najim. So thank you very much. We thank the audience for your passive listening. I'm sure that you would have enjoyed listening to the speakers. We thank you all, and we'll meet you again for some other webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.